Disclaimer. I apologize in advance for any words that may sound unclear or mumbled. The AI narrator used was a more affordable option, but I took care to ensure that it wouldn't interfere with the flow of the story. You may notice some sentences are slightly compressed, and if you hear the word dot between words, it's likely due to the period being read aloud as part of the sentence.
Chapter 24. The rain had just started to fall, soft and steady, as Ethan pulled into the parking lot of the local police station. The windshield wipers dragged rhythmically, thudding back and forth in a slow, tired sweep. The sky above was overcast, bruised with thunderclouds. Ethan stared through the glass, jaw clenched, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. She had been alone for too long. Hurt too deeply. Forgotten by a world that should have protected her. And now that she was finally home, he wasn't going to let anything touch her. Not lies. Not secrets. Not monsters in nice clothes. And definitely not people like Leslie Lynch. He stepped out of the car, boots splashing lightly in the puddled pavement. The wind tugged at his coat as he walked with purpose through the double doors of the station. Familiar faces greeted him from behind the desk, but none more familiar than Officer Todd Rayner, a longtime friend. Todd looked up from his paperwork, blinking once. Well, Ethan Strickland, what brings you in tonight? Ethan's voice was firm but low. I'm here to file a formal complaint. And press charges. That got Todd's attention. He straightened in his chair and grabbed a pen. What are we talking about? Death threats, Ethan said. Targeted harassment. I have them all, screenshots, timestamps, verified sources. They were sent directly to my daughter. Todd blinked, concern rising in his features. Someone threatened little Abby? Ethan shook his head slowly. Not that one. Todd paused, his eyes searching Ethan's. A long beat passed as understanding crept in, but he didn't want to assume, not unless he heard it from Ethan himself. You don't mean? Ethan's throat tightened but he nodded, tears glossing over his eyes. My baby girl has come home. Todd's eyes widened, and in an instant he was out from behind the desk, pulling Ethan into a tight embrace. How? Todd asked, voice choked with emotion. How did you find her? Ethan smiled through the sting in his eyes. She was Abby's dance teacher. She'd been using her middle name, Danielle. That's why we didn't recognize her. She's grown so much, Todd. She's incredible. Todd pulled back, jaw slack with disbelief. All this time. She's been out there alone for 12 years, Ethan said quietly. And she still managed to become one of the kindest, strongest young women I've ever met. Todd wiped at his eye discreetly. I can't believe what Miranda did. I swear, Ethan, arresting her wasn't something I wanted to do. Not like that. Not in front of your family. I know, Ethan said with a heavy sigh. But thank you for doing it. You did what needed to be done. There was a beat of silence before Todd motioned them both back toward the desk. So, tell me more about the report. She's 18 now, Ethan said, pulling out his phone and unlocking the evidence. She's a licensed instructor, running a professional dance studio. These threats came from Leslie Lynch, a dance teacher at Silver Creek High. She was suspended after my daughter turned her in for the messages. She dropped the charges later, but I want to reopen the case. These aren't just insults. They're threats. Threats on her life. Todd's face darkened as he read the messages on the screen. His jaw tensed. I have seen them, but all I got was Danielle. She wouldn't give me her last name. I think that's why she dropped the charges. This is serious. I know, Ethan said. That's why I want it on the record. No more second chances. No more keeping it off the books. I want it documented and I want her held accountable. No one threatens my daughter and walks away from it. He paused, voice tightening. And now that I've got Elisa back, I'm going to protect her with everything I've got. Todd gave a slow, grim nod. Then let's get the paperwork started. They sat together at the desk, the tapping of keys and scribble of pens cutting through the quiet hum of the storm outside. The rain had begun to come down harder, a steady percussion against the windows. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. But within the walls of the police station, a different kind of storm was beginning. One fueled not by fury but by truth. And Ethan was ready to weather every bit of it for her. After leaving the police station, Ethan drove straight to the hospital. The storm outside had thickened into a steady downpour, but he didn't care. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. The bracelet still rested in his coat pocket, proof of what had been lost and what had now been reclaimed. He checked in at the front desk calmly. Asked for Patricia Lemon's room. The nurse hesitated but gave it to him. Room 208. Orthopedic wing. Back injury. Ethan walked down the quiet hallway, each step deliberate. Each breath measured. But when he opened the door and saw her lying in a hospital bed, one arm in a sling, her back heavily braced, eyes scanning her phone like nothing had happened, he stopped in the doorway and stared. Patricia slowly looked up and her casual expression froze. He didn't know him. Not yet. But her body instantly registered him as a threat. Ethan took a step into the room. "You're lucky," he said coldly, "that a sprained back is all you walked away with." Patricia's lips parted. "Excuse me." Ethan's voice didn't rise, that it didn't need to. "Because if I had been there when you tried to put your hands on my daughter, your back wouldn't have been the only thing broken." Her eyes widened in disbelief and fear. I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped closer, calm but direct. "I'm not here for a debate, Lemon. I'm not the police. I'm the father of 2 daughters. One of them, my youngest, you exposed yourself to in a school setting, dressed like you were auditioning for a strip club. You strutted around in front of minors with no shame, setting a twisted example." Patricia shrank slightly, but he wasn't finished. "And the other? My oldest daughter, the one who's had to survive hell just to breathe freely, she came to confront you. To protect her little sister. To stand up to the garbage the rest of the world refuses to call out." Patricia's mouth opened but nothing came out. "You didn't just humiliate yourself," Ethan said, stepping even closer, his voice like iron. "You made yourself the reason why girls think they have to be objectified to be talented. You targeted the very thing my daughter has been fighting to heal." Patricia finally spoke, weak, breathless. I didn't mean to." "You meant exactly what you did," Ethan cut in, eyes burning. "You thought you could intimidate an 18-year-old girl. And when she outdanced you, outclassed you and outsmarted you, you tried to flip the narrative. But now I know the truth. And I will not let filth like you near either of my girls ever again." Patricia turned her face away, her mouth trembling. Ethan stared at her one last time. "I hope that brace keeps you lying down for a long time. Because the next time you think about lifting your hands or your eyes toward someone else's daughter, I want you to remember me." He turned and walked out without another word. And Patricia was left alone, no power, no audience and no defense. When Ethan walked back into the house, the sound that greeted him wasn't silence or tension. It was chaos. Blasting through the living room speakers was what could only be described as deafening death metal, screeching guitars, pounding drums and guttural vocals shaking the walls. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the sight of his daughters, Elisa and Abby, floating around the living room like ballerinas, twirling and leaping with over-the-top grace like they were dancing to Swan Lake instead of a heavy metal mosh pit. Kelly was seated on the couch, doubled over in laughter, her phone halfway up like she was ready to record the next viral video. Ethan just stood there in the doorway, dumbfounded, a slow grin forming on his face. "Oh my gosh," Abby squealed, still spinning. "Dad's home." Elisa tried to pirouette and fell backward onto the couch in a fit of laughter. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. He walked over to the speaker and turned the music down just enough for their ears to stop ringing. "I'll say this much," he said, raising an eyebrow. "I've seen some weird choreography in my life. But that was uniquely terrifying." "Thank you," Abby curtsied dramatically. Ethan smiled, but his tone shifted gently. "I wanted to let you all know. I pressed charges. Against Mrs. Lynch." The room quieted. Elisa straightened on the couch, her smile fading. "You did?" He nodded. "Yeah. I gave the police everything, texts, names, details. She's going to answer for what she said. For what she almost did." Elisa slowly stood and walked toward him, eyes softening. She wrapped her arms around him, her head resting against his chest. Ethan held her close, one hand gently cradling the back of her head like he had the week before. "You're safe here," he said softly. "You're never going to be alone again. I'm going to make damn sure of that." She nodded against his chest, eyes closing. Abby walked over and hugged them both from the side, and Kelly joined with a warm smile, wrapping her arms around all three. Then Ethan leaned back slightly, his face brightening with mock sternness. "But let's get one thing clear," he said, raising an eyebrow at Elisa. "You are grounded." Elisa blinked. "Wait, what?" "For that outfit you wore to the Patricia Lemon SmackDown show," Ethan said, trying to keep a straight face. Sparkly fantasy shirt? Leather skirt? What were you, a warrior from a vampire nightclub? Kelly burst out laughing. Abby gasped and pointed. You so were. Elisa's mouth dropped open in mock betrayal. It was strategic. Intimidation where? Well, consider yourself intimidatingly grounded, Ethan said, crossing his arms. They all erupted into laughter. And in that moment, despite the chaos, the tears, the heartbreak, and everything that had come before, it finally felt like a home. A real one. One built not just with walls, but with love. Chapter 25. The studio was quiet, just the soft hum of a vacuum running in the background and the faint clink of boxes being stacked. Elisa stood in the middle of her small bedroom while what had been her bedroom, sorting through the last of her things. It looked different now in the daylight. Less like a refuge and more like what it had always been, a storage room. She folded the last blanket and placed it gently into a box labeled Keep. Her favorite mug, her journals. A few small pictures, one of her at age 6 with her dad before everything went dark. She looked around the room one final time, her heart feeling light. Free. I'm going home, she whispered aloud, smiling. The next morning, Elisa sat behind her studio's front desk, sipping tea as the schedule for the next few weeks played quietly on her laptop. She was dressed comfortably now, stylish but modest, confident but relaxed. Her phone buzzed. She rolled her eyes when she saw the name, then answered. Good morning, she said, her voice calm but direct. Hi, the man on the other end stammered. Miss Danielle. You're fine with just Danielle. There was a long pause. Really? I appreciate that. Listen, Rachel is in a new home, so I won't be paying for her classes. So that means your creepy face won't be shown here ever again? Elisa said. He laughs nervously. Well, basically I know I can be a little weird sometimes and I didn't mean to. She hung up. She took a slow sip of tea, eyes steady, her breathing even. Elisa wasn't hiding anymore. And no one was ever going to take advantage of her or anyone she protected again. The weeks turned into months, and life finally settled into something Elisa had never truly known before, peace. She still ran her studio, but it no longer felt like a secret shelter from the world. It was a place of joy now, of light, and family. And the best part, her baby sister Abby danced there nearly every day. Family doesn't pay, Elisa had said firmly when Ethan tried to slip her money. And when she turns 16, she's got a job waiting. Front desk or assistant, whatever she wants. Abby had lit up like a firework. And Elisa, something in her had shifted. Her teaching became stronger, warmer, more inspired than ever before. People had always admired her skill, but now they admired her heart. Her laughter was genuine. Her guidance, deeply personal. The love she poured into every lesson was different now, rooted in the wholeness she'd finally found. The students adored her. And so did the parents. Especially now that the community had learned the full story, Danielle was really Elisa Strickland, the daughter who had returned home after 12 long years. At school, Abby became something of a legend. Her grades were soaring, her friendships strong, and her reputation better than ever. But what made her stand out wasn't her dancing, it was her kindness, her discipline, and the calm, confident way she carried herself. Everyone asked what changed. Abby always gave the same answer: my sister came home. Her friends were floored when they found out Danielle and Elisa were the same person. That can't be real, one said. She's like, perfect. She's been through a lot, Abby would say. But she's everything I want to be. At home, the bond between Ethan and Elisa grew stronger every day. And slowly, gently, so did the one with Kelly. At first it was cautious, respectful. But over time the tension melted away. Now, Elisa called her mom without hesitation. Sometimes Kelly would cry afterward, but always privately, always with a smile. Justice followed behind them slowly but surely. Mrs. Lynch was convicted of making criminal threats and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Her once thriving studio closed down within weeks. No one wanted to send their children to a place run by someone who threatened a person's life. Patricia Lemon's downfall wasn't a party either. Charged with filing a false police report and interfering with a minor's welfare, she received a 1-year prison sentence. Worse still, her doctors confirmed what she feared most. The spinal injury she sustained meant she'd never dance professionally again. But the Stricklands didn't speak of her often. They didn't need to. That part of the story was over. In the months that followed, the house stayed full of laughter, of music, of inside jokes and dance shoes by the door. There were movie nights, Shared dinners. Late night heart-to-hearts. The pain hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined them. Because Elisa was no longer a missing piece. She was home. And this time she wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 26. The mountain trail wound through tall pines and golden autumn leaves, the sunlight breaking through the trees in soft, patchy rays. Elisa and Ethan walked side by side, the crisp air quiet between them except for the crunch of boots on fallen leaves and the occasional chirp of a distant bird. They had been walking for a while now, Elisa's backpack bouncing lightly against her back. But eventually she slowed down with a breathy laugh. "Hey, I need a break. My legs are screaming." Ethan chuckled and nodded, pointing to a flat rock beneath a tall oak tree. "Let's sit." They dropped their packs, settled in, and took a few long sips of water. The view below was breathtaking, rolling hills, fading into soft blue haze, but Elisa's eyes weren't focused on the scenery. They sat quietly for a minute. Then Ethan spoke, his voice gentle. "You've come a long way, you know. I still can't believe how strong you are." Elisa gave a faint smile, but it faded quickly. "I don't feel strong," she said. "Not always." Ethan glanced at her, sensing more behind the words. "You don't have to feel it to be it." Elisa looked down at her hands, nervously twisting the bracelet around her wrist. "There's stuff I haven't told you." Ethan didn't flinch. "You don't have to." "I think I do," she said. "I want to." He nodded. Elisa took a deep breath, then started slowly. "After that woman who took me was arrested. They put me in foster care. Different places, different rules. But the same story. Nobody really wanted me. Just the money." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "They said I had behavioral issues," she continued. "That I was defiant. Angry. But I wasn't angry, I was scared. I never felt safe anywhere. And..." She paused, her voice catching. Ethan leaned a little closer. "You can stop if it's too much." "No," she said quickly. "I need to say it." Another breath. Her shoulders tense. "I got kicked out of 3 different foster homes. Because I had this really bad addiction. I would sneak onto their computers and..." She couldn't finish it. Ethan gently placed a hand on her back and rubbed in slow, steady circles. She bit her lip, eyes starting to brim with tears. "I was looking at stuff I shouldn't have. Like porn. And stuff." Ethan didn't say a word at first. Just kept rubbing her back, calm, steady, safe. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to be ashamed of that." She looked up at him, eyes wide and afraid. "You're not disgusted?" "Not even a little," he said. "Sweetheart. You were traumatized. Hurt. Confused. You were looking for something, anything that made you feel something different than fear or pain. People don't talk about it, but abuse like that can absolutely trigger addiction to porn. Especially when no one's there to help you sort through what you've been through." Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "I didn't know what was wrong with me," she whispered. "I just wanted to stop." Ethan pulled her into him, wrapping both arms around her tightly. He lifted her, not off the ground but just enough that she felt like a child again, cradled and safe, her feet barely brushing the earth. His chin rested gently on her shoulder as she sobbed. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you now. You don't ever have to carry that alone again." She clung to him like a lifeline, her body shaking as years of shame poured out. "I love you," Ethan said, holding her tighter. "Nothing will ever change that. Not your past. Not your pain. Nothing." Elisa didn't answer with words. He just cried. Elisa wiped the last of her tears with her wrists, her head resting lightly against Ethan's shoulder. The quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, peaceful. Then Ethan spoke softly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, her voice still raspy from crying. He looked at her gently. "What happened with Patricia Lemon? The way it all went down. Was that just confrontation or was there a strategy behind it?" Elisa exhaled slowly, her gaze lowering. "It was a strategy." He nodded, waiting. "I didn't just want to shut her down," she said. "I wanted her exposed. I wanted to stop grooming from happening to someone else the way it happened to me. So I looked her up, dug deep, found out about her past. She had this record of getting involved with younger dancers, always just old enough to keep it legal. She even screwed over her first accomplice, another woman she dragged into her mess." Elisa's jaw tightened. "She's a nasty lesbian." Ethan raised a brow gently but didn't react strongly. Nasty lesbian, huh? She blinked and immediately tensed. Wait, was that homophobic? I didn't mean it like that. I just... Ethan gave her a gentle smile. Sweetheart, don't be sorry. You remember I used to read the Bible to you every night when you were little, right? She nodded slowly. I'm not judging you. I just wanted to understand where that came from. Elisa looked down at her hands again. One of my foster homes. They were real pushy about the LGBT stuff. Constant lectures, constant labeling. I've always known it wasn't for me and I didn't agree with a lot of what they were pushing, but they made it all feel so forced. So fake. And after everything I went through... She shook her head. It made it feel even more twisted. Like they were trying to convince me my trauma was some kind of identity. Ethan nodded solemnly. I don't like lesbians, she admitted. Because the only ones I ever knew used me or tried to reshape me. Then she hesitated. And spoke again even more quietly. I tried it once, she said. When I was about Abby's age. Just to see. I thought maybe I could. I don't know. Cleanse myself from what my foster dad did to me. Like if I chose it, it wouldn't feel so dark. But it didn't work. It just made everything feel worse. Like I doubled the ickiness I already had. She gave a dry little laugh. And no, I'm not secretly gay trying to cover it up in case you're wondering. Ethan smirked and nudged her gently. Didn't think that for a second. Elisa laughed a little more genuinely this time. Then Ethan asked, so, that outfit. You really wore it to bait Patricia? Elisa nodded without shame. Yeah. I knew her type. She wouldn't be able to resist if I looked too good, too young, too naive. I wanted her to try. To cross the line. Because I knew her security cameras were rolling and if she touched me I'd have her. On tape. In her own studio. Ethan let out a low whistle. You really played the long game. She played worse, Elisa said. I just gave her the chance to self-destruct. I knew her pride wouldn't let her walk away without proving something. That's why I did the flexibility stunts. I knew she'd try. I wanted her to try. And she did. Ethan nudged her shoulder with a smirk. We'll keep that between us for now. Elisa chuckled. Deal. They both stood, brushing dirt from their pants and picking up their water bottles. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, painting everything in golden light as they continued up the trail side by side, no longer weighed down by secrets, shame, or silence. Just a father and his daughter. Walking forward. Together. Chapter 27. The house was dark and quiet, the moonlight spilling gently through the blinds. But Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea in front of him, his fingers drumming against the ceramic. His thoughts were loud, louder than any storm, and none of them would let him rest. The memory had come back slowly at first. Then all at once. 14 years ago. He was standing in the living room of their house, watching little 4-year-old Elisa twirl in a makeshift tutu, giggling as she tried to mimic the ballerinas she saw on TV. Her cheeks were full and rosy, her curls bouncing as she spun. She tripped over her own feet and fell onto the carpet with a giggle. Ethan chuckled, walking over to help her up. You okay, princess? I did a spin fall, she announced proudly, arms flailing as he lifted her. He laughed and kissed her cheek. But from the hallway, Miranda stood with her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed with disapproval. She's getting pudgy, Miranda said flatly. Ethan's smile faded. She's 4, Miranda. Miranda looking at him sharply and says. She's supposed to be graceful. A dancer. A star. And if she keeps eating the way she does, no one's ever going to take her seriously. She is graceful, Ethan snapped. And she's skinny. She's a toddler, not a model. Miranda rolled her eyes. You just don't get it. I'm raising a future superstar. She has to be perfect now so it's easier later. Weight is one of the first things they judge and you know it. I'm not going to shame my daughter for having a baby belly, Ethan said firmly, holding Elisa tighter. You're the one who doesn't get it. Miranda scoffed and walked away. Elisa looked up at him, confused. Did I do bad? Ethan kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart. You did perfect. Back in the present, Ethan leaned forward and buried his face in his hands. All those years he tried to forget Miranda's cruelty. Tried to rationalize it. Tried to keep the peace. But now he knew how much worse it had gotten once he was gone. How the woman he once loved had warped their daughter's earliest memories. Then left her to be swallowed by a world that never gave her a chance. He looked at the hallway now, quiet, peaceful. Elisa was safe in her room. Kelly asleep just down the hall. But Ethan's heart was aching. He couldn't change the past. But he would never let it repeat. He stood up slowly, walked toward the hallway and paused outside Elisa's door. For a long moment he just listened until he heard the soft rhythm of her breathing. Safe. Finally safe. He rested his hand against the doorframe, closed his eyes and whispered, "You're perfect. Then now. Always." And with that he finally walked away, ready to let go of the guilt and hold on to the future. Ethan sat back down at the table, the tea still cold, his thoughts spiraling again. One memory had opened the door to another. Another flash from the past. Elisa was 4, maybe 4.5, and having a typical meltdown. She was on the floor, face red, little fists pounding the carpet as she cried about not getting to eat ice cream before dinner. Her cheeks were wet, her nose running, her sobs real and loud in that way only toddlers could manage. And Miranda? She was standing over her daughter, not with concern, not with comfort, but with her phone up. Snapping photos. Tapping record. "Poor baby," she cooed, but her voice was syrupy and cold. "These kids at school are just too much, aren't they?" Elisa wailed harder, not understanding the words, just overwhelmed by her own feelings. Miranda leaned down, angling the camera to catch both of them in frame. "Say hi to mommy's followers, sweet girl." Ethan had just walked into the room. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked, stunned. Miranda smiled sweetly, not even looking up from her phone. "I'm showing awareness. #stop bullying. #mama bear mode. It's good PR." "She's not being bullied." Ethan snapped. "She's 4. She's throwing a tantrum because we wouldn't let her eat ice cream. She looks sad. That's all people need to see," Miranda said. "The engagement is already through the roof. People love this." Ethan had stared at her in disbelief. And now, years later, he could still remember the exact caption she used. "This poor girl has been through it lately. Kids at school are so mean. #stop bullying. #protect your babies. #bless your little heart." He had tried to rationalize it back then. Tried to tell himself Miranda was just misguided. That it was harmless. That Elisa wouldn't remember. But now he knew better. It wasn't just bad parenting. It was exploitation. It was conditioning. And it was part of the twisted chain that had set Elisa on the path to being used, discarded, and forgotten. Ethan's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists on the table. He couldn't go back and stop it. But he would spend the rest of his life undoing it. And proving to Elisa, every single day, that she was not a prop. Not a product. Not a hashtag. She was his daughter. And she was real. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular, but the memories kept coming, sharper now, crueler in their clarity. Another one. He remembered Miranda pacing the living room, arms folded, her tone persistent and insistent. "I think we should adopt," she said. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Adopt? Why?" "Because," she said sharply, "Elisa's so difficult. I thought she'd be different. I want a child who fits. Who I can actually do something with." Ethan's blood ran cold. "She's your daughter, Miranda." "I know," she snapped. "But you can't tell me she's not exhausting. I need balance. Someone I can shape. Someone who can actually be something." Ethan had fought it. For weeks. Fought it with logic. With emotion. With everything he had. But Miranda didn't let up. She cried. She guilted him. She painted the idea like it was noble. A chance to give another child a home. A sibling for Elisa. A good deed. And slowly, shamefully, he gave in. "I can't believe I said yes," he muttered to himself in the dark kitchen now. And then came Abby. Adopted at just a few months old, with big eyes and the softest laugh. Ethan had loved her instantly, and so had Elisa, clinging to her new baby sister like she was the most precious thing in the world. Miranda had named her Abigail, but insisted she go by Abby. "It's cuter," she said. But what Ethan remembered most wasn't the name. It was how Miranda changed. Every day after the adoption, she had her phone in hand. Photo after photo. Video after video. Cutesy outfits. Matching bows. Crib scenes with Elisa awkwardly cropped out of the frame. Abby in Miranda's arms. Abby in matching clothes. Abby in online posts with captions like, "My little miracle girl. So thankful for my sweet Abby. She's everything I ever dreamed of." And Elisa? She was in the background. Sometimes literally. A blur. A half face. a pair of small hands just outside the crop. Miranda would take endless shots of herself cuddling Abby, while Elisa stood off to the side, clutching a toy or looking toward her mother with that small, confused hope. The kind that breaks a father's heart even a decade later. And when Elisa asked to be in the pictures, Miranda would smile and say, "Maybe later, sweetheart. Mommy's working." But later never came. Not for her. Ethan sat at the table now, choking back tears, his chest tight with guilt. "I let it happen," he whispered. "I let her fade." But he wasn't going to let her stay in the background. Not anymore. He stood up, walked quietly down the hall, and this time he didn't stop at Elisa's door. He opened it gently. She was asleep, curled under the blanket, her bracelet glinting in the moonlight. Ethan walked in, knelt beside her bed, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have protected you better. But I will now." He stayed there a long time, watching her breathe. And promising himself, she will never be invisible again. Ethan hadn't moved from the edge of Elisa's bed. His eyes were locked on the soft rise and fall of her breathing, but his mind, it was boiling. Memory after memory of Miranda's cruelty surged like waves. The way she shamed Elisa. The way she staged every moment with Abby while ignoring the child who needed her most. The manipulation. The lies. The abandonment. His jaw began to tighten. His hand slowly curled into a fist against his knee. All those years wasted. All those cries Elisa buried. All the moments a father should have been there. He clenched harder. And that's when he heard the soft sound of bare feet behind him. He turned and saw Abby standing in the doorway in her pajama pants and oversized t-shirt, her hair messy from sleep, rubbing her eyes. "Dad?" she asked gently. "Are you okay?" Ethan loosened his hand immediately, forcing the tension from his face as he stood up slowly. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, walking toward her. "I'm all right." She looked up at him, not fully convinced. "You looked like you were about to punch a wall." Ethan gave a soft laugh and pulled her into a side hug, kissing the top of her head. "Just thinking about a lot of things." Abby hugged him back quietly, leaning against his side. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah. Just reminded of how lucky I am to have you too." Abby smiled up at him. "Well, you're stuck with us now." Ethan looked back one more time at Elisa, sleeping peacefully at last, then down at Abby, his second daughter, now fully aware of the truth and still standing here with nothing but love. "I wouldn't trade it for anything," he said. And he meant it. Because no matter how much darkness lived in the past, this was the light. After Abby went back to bed, Ethan stood alone in the hallway, bathed in silence and shadows. The house was still, but inside him memories still roared. And then, one more surfaced. The last one he'd spent years trying not to relive. Back when Elisa was 6. He had been fighting with Miranda more often by then, daily arguments over her coldness, her favoritism, her obsession with social media, and worst of all, how she treated Elisa like an obligation. "She's your daughter too," Ethan had snapped, pacing the living room. Miranda barely looked up from her phone. "She's difficult." "She's 6, Miranda." "She's not difficult, she's just ignored." Miranda rolled her eyes. "I spend time with her." "No," he shot back. "You pose with her. You perform around her. That little girl would give anything for one afternoon of your actual attention." For a moment, Miranda didn't have a retort. And then for the first time in months, she listened. The next day, as Ethan tied his shoes by the front door, Miranda grabbed her keys. Elisa came running, eyes wide and hopeful. "Are we really going, Mommy?" Miranda smiled, almost convincingly. "You ready?" Elisa nodded so hard her curls bounced. She turned to Ethan with excitement shining in her eyes. Ethan knelt down and kissed her forehead. "Hey, if you ever need me for anything, you come to me, okay?" She smiled big and threw her arms around him. "I will." Then she grabbed Miranda's hand and practically skipped out the door. Ethan stood at the window watching them pull out of the driveway, feeling a strange mix of relief and pride. Finally, Miranda was stepping up. He believed it. He wanted to believe it. But hours passed. Then more. It was unforgivable. Ethan stayed there in the hallway, hand pressed to the wall, heart pounding in the quiet. Elisa's room behind him, Abby's further down. Safe. Breathing. Home. But his mind wouldn't let him go. Just after dark, the front door burst open. Miranda came in screaming, mascara running, keys flung across the floor. She's gone, she wailed. Elise is gone. She ran off, she was right there. Ethan's heart stopped. What do you mean she's gone? Miranda sobbed harder, throwing out a story that didn't make sense. They stopped for gas. Elisa had to use the bathroom. Miranda turned her head and suddenly she was gone. He didn't wait for more. He got in his truck and drove for hours, searching every station, every roadside stop, every corner of the highway. Calling her name, asking strangers, looking under every light post and in every shadow. But when he came home just before dawn and saw Miranda sitting calmly on the couch, not panicked anymore, just scrolling her phone with a blanket around her shoulders, already wearing a carefully rehearsed look of devastation, he knew. He didn't have proof. Not yet. But deep in his gut, a father's instinct burned through the denial. She didn't lose Elisa. She ditched her. Somewhere. Like garbage. Like a burden she was finally done pretending to care about. And Ethan had been too late to stop it. Chapter 28. The hallway was dim in the early morning, the house still quiet. Ethan stepped out of his room, stretching with a yawn and rubbing the back of his neck. That's when he heard it. Vomiting. He froze. It was coming from the bathroom. Without hesitation, he rushed to the door and knocked hard, voice sharp with concern. Elisa, you okay? Pause. Then her voice, strained, weak, and laced with shame. Yeah, I'm fine. Ethan didn't buy it. Doesn't sound fine. It's not a big deal, she muttered. Now he was even more concerned. Elisa, what happened? Silence. Then finally through the door came the confession. I tasted the shampoo. Ethan blinked. You what? Another groan. I tasted the shampoo. It smelled like birthday cake and I wanted to see if it tasted like it. But I accidentally swallowed some. For a moment Ethan was at a loss. He stared at the door, stunned. Then a chuckle escaped. Then a full laugh. You're kidding me. I wish I was, she grumbled. Ethan laughed harder, leaning a hand against the wall to steady himself. Oh my gosh, he wheezed. You're a business owner. An elite dancer. And you're out here. Drinking shampoo. It wasn't on purpose. Shut up, she shouted from the other side of the door. He chuckled and backed away from the door. No judgment. But you might want to leave the taste testing to the bakery next door. Shut up. He was still grinning as he walked down the hallway. Love you, kiddo, he called over his shoulder. He heard her groan again, half embarrassed, half laughing, and it made his heart feel a little lighter. Yeah, they were gonna be just fine. Ethan made his way downstairs, still shaking his head with a grin. Kelly was in the kitchen making coffee, and Abby was at the counter scrolling on her phone when he walked in. He leaned against the fridge and said casually, so, apparently the shampoo upstairs smells like birthday cake. Kelly turned. Okay. And? Ethan smirked. And Elisa wanted to see if it tasted like birthday cake. Kelly blinked. Abby slowly lowered her phone. Ethan finished. She accidentally swallowed some. Kelly burst out laughing, loud, sudden, and completely unrestrained. He grabbed the counter for support, wheezing. Oh no, she didn't. Abby's jaw dropped with a mix of horror and hilarity. Wait, seriously? Who eats shampoo? Ethan threw up his hands. Hey, don't look at me. I'm just the guy who found her puking and confessing through the door. They all laughed now, Kelly nearly in tears, Abby grinning so hard her face hurt. And as Ethan looked between them, something warm and surreal washed over him. Just months ago, Elisa had been this mystery, this perfectly composed, mature young woman who carried herself like she was years older than she was. Charmed, flawless, guarded. And now she was his goofy, brilliant, occasionally impulsive 18-year-old daughter, full of life and wholesome chaos and weird decisions like taste-testing shampoo because it smelled like dessert. She was home. Ethan chuckled softly and shook his head. I swear, he muttered, she's becoming more of a kid now than she was at 6. Kelly smiled knowingly. That's because for the first time, she gets to be one. Ethan nodded, heartful. And in the laughter echoing through the kitchen, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. Chapter 29. It started small. A clip here, a headline there, local news stations across the country replaying surveillance footage from inside Patricia Lemon's studio. The eerie silence. The suggestive touch. The confrontation. At first people were confused. Curious. Some outraged, others skeptical. But then the name Danielle started trending again. And not just in dance circles. People started asking, who is she? Why did she do it? And was she right? The story began to boil. And then it exploded. National media picked it up overnight. Left-wing outlets debated consent and accused Danielle of entrapment. Right-wing networks hailed her as a hero, a whistleblower who exposed yet another piece of corrupt, sexualized Hollywood rot. And behind all the noise, Elisa sat at home, quietly watching her old name light up the screen. Danielle wasn't just a private figure anymore. She was a national headline. Meanwhile, Leslie Lynch, out on bail and watching bitterly from the sidelines, started stirring the pot. He did interviews, tossed accusations, called Danielle manipulative, unstable, a danger to the dance community. Patricia Lemon, still waiting for trial and recovering in physical therapy, gave a short statement through her lawyer. Danielle's actions were clearly vindictive and targeted. She set me up. I look forward to my day in court. But then something changed. People started talking. Really talking. One girl came forward on social media. Then another. And another. A 14-year-old from Miami posted a video. She told me I had the kind of body that would go far in show business. I was 12. A mother from Nevada wrote a blog post about how Patricia insisted her 9-year-old wear a high-cut leotard and heels for a confidence-building routine. Another teen posted screenshots of DMs. Compliments on body parts. Late-night messages. Suddenly the narrative shifted. Elisa hadn't exposed just one incident. She'd opened a floodgate. The real story wasn't just about a dance teacher with a plan, it was about what that plan had revealed. A predator in plain sight. Protected by reputation. Enabled by silence. And the girl who finally had the courage to say enough. Across televisions and streaming screens nationwide, the footage played on loop. Danielle, Elisa, walking into Patricia Lemon's studio late at night. Quiet, calm, dressed boldly, yes, but saying nothing, doing nothing. Patricia leaning in. Patricia touching. Danielle flinching away, her eyes never breaking contact with the camera. And then Patricia's hand grabbing. Danielle backing up. No yelling. No retaliation. Just a young woman clearly not consenting. And yet the country remained divided. One of the most watched clips came from a live debate segment on a major news network. Two anchors sat across from each other, both fired up. "Let's not pretend," the first anchor said, voice sharp. "She wore that outfit for a reason. You don't show up dressed like that to a late-night private studio meeting unless you're looking to provoke something." The second anchor leaned back, unimpressed. "Seriously, that's the defense now?" "I'm just saying she knew what she was doing." "So what if she did?" the second anchor snapped. "Even if she walked in naked, Patricia Lemon had no right to put her hands on her. None." The first anchor raised a brow. "Come on, there's responsibility on both sides." "And what about consent?" the second anchor shot back. "Aren't liberals all about that these days? Isn't that the golden rule?" He gestured to the screen where the clip was frozen mid-frame. Danielle pulling away, Patricia's hand still extended. "Well, guess what?" he said firmly. "This right here is exactly what consent looks like. Clear refusal. Body language saying no." He tapped the table. Danielle didn't provoke anything. She didn't say a word. She just showed up. And Patricia exposed herself for exactly what she is. The clip went viral again, this time with hashtags like #ConsentMatters, #Justice for Danielle, #Protect Our Daughters. Even those who had doubted began to ask the right questions. Because the footage didn't lie. And Elisa wasn't just a dancer anymore. She had become a symbol. Of boundaries. Of courage. And of what happens when silence finally meets its match. The emails started pouring in first. Then phone calls. Then a formal letter hand-delivered to the studio. The Dr. Andrew Show wanted her. It was one of the most watched psychological talk shows in the country, known for its sharp analysis, high-profile guests, and no-nonsense host. Dr. Andrew had a reputation for seeing straight through people and for giving victims of trauma a voice. But this time he wanted both. And Patricia Lemon. The studio went quiet when she read the letter out loud. She could feel the weight of it instantly. Not just a local news clip. Not a viral moment. National TV. A full segment. Face to face. The nerves crept in like a cold wave. Her stomach turned, her heart pounded. She wasn't afraid to speak, but she had never expected her life, her past, and her pain to be dissected in front of millions. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted softly, pacing the living room. Ethan stood and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. You don't have to. Not unless you want to. Kelly stepped in beside him. But if you do, we'll be right there with you. Elisa looked over at Abby, who gave her a small but confident grin. You've already faced worse. What's one more spotlight? Elisa laughed through her nerves. You're not wrong. She sat down slowly, gripping the letter in her hands, the bold words Dr. Andrew show feature request staring back at her. She was used to public recognition. Running her own studio had taught her how to be composed in front of parents, dancers, and the local community. But this was the world watching. Still, she didn't feel small anymore. Not with her family behind her. Not with the truth on her side. She took a deep breath and looked up. All right, she said. Let's do it. Chapter 30. The studio lights burned bright. The cameras panned across the audience. Tension crackled in the air like electricity before a storm. Dr. Andrew sat between them, his trademark calm and sharp intelligence filling the space. To his left sat Patricia Lemon, posture tight, makeup perfect, and lips pursed like she was waiting to strike. To his right sat Elisa. Poised. Feudal. No longer the mysterious Danielle, but the woman the world was finally beginning to understand. Dr. Andrew turned to the camera. Before we begin, I'd like to clarify that from here forward, we'll be referring to this young woman by her real name, Elisa, not Danielle. He then turned to face her directly, setting the tone with his signature composed voice. Elisa, he said, you're known for your modest style, your strict personal standards, and a strong sense of self-respect. And yet, in the footage that went viral, you're wearing something very bold, eye-catching. Can you explain that choice? Elisa didn't hesitate. She sat back comfortably in her chair, the faintest glint of a familiar grin playing on her lips, the same sly, knowing smirk she used to wear when she was steps ahead of everyone in the room. Because I wanted to provoke her, she said plainly. The audience collectively gasped. Patricia's eyes widened. Dr. Andrew raised a brow. You wanted to provoke Patricia? Elisa nodded, unbothered. Yes, I wanted to bait her, so she would destroy herself right there on camera. Another wave of shocked murmurs echoed through the audience. Elisa continued, her voice calm, even surgical. I was originally just going to report her to the police. Quietly, let them pull the studio footage. Let the system deal with it. But when I saw how many people still supported her, how many parents kept sending their kids to her, I realized something bigger had to happen. So I set the stage. And she performed exactly how I knew she would. Silence. Even Dr. Andrew, usually hard to faze, paused. He glanced at Patricia. Patricia, he said, your thoughts on Elisa's statement? Patricia looked utterly thrown. She had expected denial, spin, something she could easily counter. But Elisa's raw honesty disarmed her completely. Patricia floundered. I didn't expect her to admit that. Dr. Andrew gave her a moment. Well, since we're being honest, let's talk about your choices. You told the police that Elisa attacked you. The footage proved otherwise. Why lie? Patricia's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted toward the camera, then back at Dr. Andrew. I felt attacked, she said finally. My character. My dignity. Before she could continue, the audience, unable to hold back, laughed. A few people actually clapped. Dr. Andrew, ever the professional, raised a hand. Let's keep it respectful, please. He turned back to Patricia. Do you mean physically attacked? No, she snapped. Emotionally. Publicly. Elisa turned her head slightly, her voice flat. You touched me without permission. On camera. Multiple times. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. The tension was building, but so was the clarity. The nation wasn't just watching two women anymore. They were watching the past and the future collide. And one of them was already losing. Patricia shifted in her seat, visibly rattled, then lowered her gaze and began to tremble, shoulders shaking just enough to seem dramatic but not enough to seem real. I was violated, she said, voice cracking. I was led on. Groomed. Dr. Andrew narrowed his eyes slightly, studying her face. You're saying you were groomed? By an 18-year-old? Patricia sniffed, still no tears in sight. Yes. She showed up in that outfit. Looking like she wanted it. Like she planned it. I didn't stand a chance. I felt manipulated. The audience was silent for half a second, unsure whether to take her seriously. And then Elisa burst out laughing. The sound cut through the tension like a blade, genuine, bold, and impossible to ignore. She leaned forward slightly, eyes twinkling with amused disbelief. "Oh please. You're telling the whole country that an 18-year-old groomed a 53-year-old woman? Because you're just so young and innocent." The crowd erupted into laughter. Scattered claps, whistles, even a few people shouting, "Say it again." Patricia's face flushed deep red. Dr. Andrew chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "I mean, let's be real here. Elisa is almost young enough to be your granddaughter. There's no world in which she could have groomed you." The laughter swelled again. Elisa sat back in her chair, arms loosely crossed, looking perfectly composed. Patricia squirmed under the heat, her earlier confidence now dripping off her like sweat. And just like that, the power she once held, the narrative she thought she could spin, was gone. Shattered. Because truth, when spoken plainly, doesn't need a spotlight. It makes one. Dr. Andrew leaned forward, steering the conversation in a new but necessary direction. "Let's talk about attire, specifically in front of students. There's been a lot of discussion about what's appropriate for young dancers and what isn't." He turned to Patricia. "Why, for example, do you choose to wear such revealing clothing when teaching children?" Patricia crossed her legs tightly, adjusting her jacket with a subtle twitch. "Because it's comfortable," she said confidently. "And it allows me to move freely. Stretching, bending, it's just a fact. You need minimal fabric for maximum flexibility. It's scientific." Elisa raised an eyebrow, a smirk creeping across her face. "Scientific, huh?" Patricia nodded. "I've been dancing longer than she's been alive," she said, gesturing dismissively toward Elisa. "I know what works. Decades of experience don't lie." Elisa glanced at Dr. Andrew, then stood up calmly. She was dressed in soft, flowing dance pants, light, breathable fabric that moved like silk. Something between jeanie pants and modern loungewear. Her top was fitted but modest, her appearance effortlessly elegant. Without missing a beat, she began to move. She lifted one leg straight up over her head, holding her foot in perfect control. The audience gasped and clapped. Then she folded backward, her palms flat on the ground behind her, arching in a full, graceful bridge. Next, she dropped into a forward fold, chest to thighs, arms outstretched in front of her. Her voice was calm as she spoke through each movement. "See," she said casually. "Full range of motion. No problem bending, stretching, folding without flashing anyone." Laughter rippled through the audience. Elisa stood upright, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "And as far as comfortable goes?" She tilted her head and gave Patricia a dry, amused look. "I don't think it's very comfortable having something wedged in your butt all day." The studio exploded in applause. Dr. Andrew actually choked on his laugh. Patricia looked stunned, mouth slightly open, eyes darting as if searching for a comeback. But there was none. Elisa sat back down, calm and composed, like she'd just performed the weather report. And in that moment, no one saw her as a victim. They saw her for who she truly was. A woman with nothing to hide, and everything to say. The tension in the studio grew heavier with every passing second. Patricia's once polished exterior was now unraveling in real time. Her composure gone, her arguments dismantled, and her reputation hanging by a thread. That's when she threw her head back slightly and cried out, "I am broken and I'm beautiful." The audience froze. Even Dr. Andrew tilted his head slightly, confused by the sudden shift in tone. Elisa raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "That's a good song," she said dryly. "But I don't think that's what it's about." Scattered laughter followed, but Patricia pushed on, her voice growing more theatrical by the second. "I stand with the LGBT community," she declared, thrusting a hand upward. "For our right to love, for our right to be free, to be brave." The audience began to murmur, some annoyed, some uncomfortable, some clearly seeing the desperation written all over her. Elisa didn't even blink. She leaned forward slightly, calm and razor-sharp. "Great way to dodge the subject," she said. "Hide behind a group because you know they'll support you no matter what. Even when you're in the wrong." Patricia opened her mouth, but Elisa kept going. "And you said brave?" she scoffed softly. "Being brave isn't about waving a rainbow flag when you get caught doing something disgusting. Being brave means standing for what you believe even when no one stands in your corner, when you've lost the moral ground, and still having the guts to admit you were wrong." The audience clapped again, louder now. Dr. Andrew nodded slowly, visibly impressed. "Well said. Patricia looked like she was deflating in her seat, her voice lost beneath the weight of Elisa's words. Because now the crowd wasn't just listening to a story. They were witnessing a reckoning. And no amount of slogans or borrowed causes could shield Patricia from the truth. The applause faded, the room quiet once again as the emotional dust settled. Dr. Andrew leaned slightly forward, his hands folded, his signature calm expression returning to center stage. His eyes settled on Elisa first. "I want to speak now," he said, from an unbiased standpoint. Elisa nodded, listening intently. "I've listened to you speak with honesty even when it shocked the audience. You've admitted your intentions. You've accepted the role you played in setting the stage. But more importantly, you showed restraint. You didn't touch anyone. You didn't act out. You relied on the truth. And from a psychological standpoint, that level of composure from someone with your trauma history is incredibly rare. And very admirable." Elisa didn't respond, but her expression softened, grateful, humbled. Dr. Andrew turned then slowly toward Patricia. The room shifted again. All eyes locked on her. "And now, Patricia." Her body stiffened in the wheelchair. "I'm also speaking to you without bias," he began, his tone firmer. "But I need you to hear this. You claimed you were groomed, provoked, and attacked, but the surveillance footage says otherwise. You claim emotional trauma, yet you've shown little understanding of the trauma you may have caused others. And now, with multiple testimonies surfacing about your behavior toward minors, many of them alarmingly consistent, you need to ask yourself something very serious." He paused. "Are they all lying? Or is the truth finally catching up to you?" Patricia's lip quivered, but no words came out. Dr. Andrew continued. "As I've seen the footage, I've read the statements, and from what I see, your behavior on that tape aligns with what many of these young women are now saying." He softened his voice only slightly. "This is your chance to change, to face what you've done, but not if you keep hiding behind tears and slogans." That was the breaking point. Patricia's face crumpled into a sob, this time louder than before, but still no tears. She gripped the wheels of her chair and turned away from the stage without asking. The audience parted as she rolled off, head down, one of the studio assistants opening the curtain for her exit. No applause. No boos. Just a tense, echoing silence as she disappeared behind the curtain. Dr. Andrew looked back toward Elisa, then to the camera. "I think we've heard all we need today." And with that, the broadcast faded to black. Chapter 31. The scent of vanilla cake and cinnamon candles drifted through the house, mixing with the sound of quiet laughter and the soft notes of music playing from the kitchen speaker. The living room lights were dimmed, except for the glow of a few flickering candles on a homemade cake, gently illuminating the smiling faces that surrounded the table. Elisa stood in the doorway for a moment, arms crossed over her chest, a smile creeping across her face. "You guys didn't have to do all this." Kelly looked up from where she was placing candles and smirked. "Yes, we did. That's what we do. You're stuck with us now, remember?" "Yeah," Ethan added, crossing the room to hand her a gift-wrapped box. "Get used to it, birthday girl. There are many more of these to come. We put extra shampoo on the cake as well." "Oh, real funny, Dad," Elisa said while laughing. Elisa took the box slowly, her fingers lingering on the wrapping. "I've never had one of these. Not for a long time," she admitted softly. "Not with my family." Ethan announces. "I would like to say a prayer before we start." They all joined hands and Ethan prays. "Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing us all together, for letting us see this moment. There were so many times we didn't know if it would ever come. So many nights filled with questions, silence, and pain. But you saw her. Even when we didn't. Even when the world left her behind, you never did. You gave her a heart that refused to quit. You gave her grace and strength and courage wrapped in quiet fire. You carried her through darkness we can never fully understand. And somehow, you brought her home. They broke her in silence. But she returned in perfect form. Not because she was untouched, but because you never let go of her spirit. We praise you for every scar she turned into wisdom. For every tear she cried that watered the soil of something stronger. And for every part of her that still chooses love, even when the world didn't deserve it. She's here. She's whole. She's yours. And she always was. Bless her future, Lord. Let this new chapter be filled with peace, purpose, and protection. Let her feel joy without fear. And never let her doubt how loved she is. In Jesus' name, amen. Abby stood beside the table, bouncing slightly in place. Can we sing now? Please. Ethan chuckled and motioned for everyone to gather around. All right, let's do it. The lights dimmed a bit more. The cake sat at the center of the table, a perfect circle of buttercream frosting and soft pink swirls. 19 candles flickered and danced. Elisa stood before it, framed in soft candlelight. Then came the song. It wasn't perfectly on key. It wasn't especially loud, but it was full of something far better: love. Real, raw, undeniable love. Happy birthday to you. By the end, Elisa's eyes were shining. Her lips trembled into a smile as everyone clapped. Make a wish, Kelly whispered. Elisa paused. She looked around at the room. At Ethan's proud smile. At Kelly's warm, tear-brimmed eyes. At Abby's beaming face. At the home, her home, where she would now get to grow, not just survive. I already got it, she said. Then she leaned forward and blew out all 19 candles. Abby clapped excitedly. Presents. Can we do both at once? Only if we let your sister open the one from all of us first, Ethan said, placing a large rectangular box in front of Elisa. She opened it slowly, carefully peeling back the paper. Inside was a framed photo, not just any photo, but one taken earlier that week at the studio. Ethan, Kelly, Abby, and Elisa all smiling in front of the mirror wall. Underneath the glass was a plaque. Welcome home, Elisa. This is only the beginning. She blinked fast, holding the frame against her chest like it might disappear if she let go. Ethan stepped forward and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're home now. Forever. And every year, no matter what, we're celebrating your birthday right here. In this house. With your family. Elisa couldn't speak. She nodded and wiped the corner of her eye. Kelly gently cut the cake and passed out slices. Abby snuck a giant spoonful of frosting and earned a playful smack on the hand. Laughter filled the room, light and sincere. Elisa felt something deeper than safety. She felt joy. The kind of joy that doesn't have to be loud. The kind that whispers. Chapter 32. Bad Influence. The morning sun cast long golden stripes across the sidewalk as Abby walked toward the school building, her two best friends, Kendra and Layla, trailing close beside her. Their voices were low, almost secretive, like they were sharing something precious. I still think it's amazing, Abby, Kendra said, pushing her dark hair behind her ear. I mean, your birth mom was only 13. That's insane. Abby gave a small, shy smile, tugging at the strap of her backpack. Yeah, she said quietly. She was young. Dumb maybe, but not evil. She wanted me to have a better life. Anne, Miranda, and Ethan gave it to me. Layla, the taller of the two, nudged her gently. You're way better off. Seriously, you got the best parents. And a big sister now. Abby's heart warmed at the thought of Elisa. Things were finally good again. Normal. Safe. They climbed the steps into the school, pushing through the crowded hallway where kids jostled for lockers and teachers barked warnings about tardies. But then they saw her. Ashley. Leaning against the lockers like she owned the whole world. Short, dirty blonde hair dyed in sharp streaks of purple and silver. Combat boots scuffing the floor. Denim jacket covered in safety pins and hand-drawn patches. Ashley wasn't exactly popular, not in the cheerleader sense. But she was known. Feared even. Punk. Rebellious. Trouble. The kind of girl you didn't look at too long. The kind of girl teachers called the principal about behind closed doors. The kind of girl they always avoided. And they were about to do just that, hurry past without making eye contact, when Ashley suddenly straightened and looked right at Abby. Hey, she said, her voice smooth but a little too casual. Kendra froze. Layla stiffened. Abby blinked, surprised, her feet glued to the floor. Ashley sauntered forward, hands tucked in her pockets, a smirk playing on her lips. You're Abby, right? Abby nodded hesitantly. Ashley shrugged one shoulder. I just wanted to say hi. And her voice lowered, almost shy. Maybe talk. Kendra grabbed Abby's wrist. Layla whispered urgently, don't. Abby's heart hammered. Every instinct told her to keep moving. To stay away. But something about Ashley's face made her hesitate. Ashley lifted her hands slightly in a surrender gesture. I'm not gonna hurt you. I swear. Her friends tugged her arm gently, pleading with their eyes. Abby wavered. Nervous. Feared. But curiosity flickered inside her too. And the tiniest, most dangerous thought whispered. Maybe she's not so bad. Slowly, Abby pulled her arm free from her friend's grasp. She took a cautious step forward. Ashley's smirk deepened just a fraction, but she kept her voice soft, almost friendly. "Come on," Ashley said. "Just wanna talk." And without waiting, she turned and started walking down the hall, expecting Abby to follow. Abby looked back at Kendra and Layla, their faces filled with fear and disbelief. She gave them a small, shaky smile. And then, she followed. Right into Ashley's world. The cafeteria was its usual chaos, kids laughing, shouting across tables, the clatter of trays and silverware echoing off the high ceilings. Abby balanced her lunch tray carefully as she made her way toward the familiar spot where Kendra and Layla were waving her over. But halfway there she heard her name. Abby. She turned and saw Ashley leaning back in her chair at a table by the windows, surrounded by 3 other kids dressed almost exactly like her, punk jackets, boots, streaked hair, smug half-smiles. Ashley waved her over casually like they were already old friends. Abby hesitated, shifting her tray nervously from one hand to the other. Kendra and Layla were still waving frantically at her from across the room. Ashley stood up, sensing the hesitation, and called out, "You can bring your friends too. Come on, we don't bite." Her crew chuckled, some of them flashing crooked smiles. Still nervous, Abby glanced at her friends, then back at Ashley. It would be rude to say no, right? And besides, it was just lunch. Nothing bad could happen at lunch. Right? Carefully, Abby made her way toward Ashley's table, motioning for Kendra and Layla to follow. Kendra shot her a wide-eyed, "Are you serious?" look, but grabbed her tray and fell in step. Layla followed, chewing her lip nervously. They slid into seats, keeping their trays close like shields. For a second nobody said anything. Ashley broke the silence first. "So," she said with a playful grin, "how about we actually, talk like normal human beings?" She popped a fry into her mouth and leaned back in her seat, looking completely at ease. "You're Elise's little sister, right?" she asked, glancing at Abby. "Yeah." Abby replied, her voice tight with nerves. Ashley leaned in, smirking. "I saw her on TV. She's the one who made that old lady hurt herself, isn't she?" "She didn't make anyone do anything," Abby snapped, her tone more defensive than she meant it to be. Ashley chuckled. "Relax. I think it's super cool. He's like an X-Men or something. If I had social skills like that, I'd never pay for lunch again." The table burst into laughter. Even Abby let out a small giggle, surprised by it. Kendra and Layla exchanged a glance. Then Kendra rolled her eyes in mock disgust at her cold slice of pizza. "Ugh, why does this taste like wet cardboard?" "Because it is wet cardboard," Layla said dryly, making everyone laugh again. They moved on to complaining about boring teachers, cafeteria disasters, and younger siblings who couldn't take a hint. With each joke and shared annoyance, the tension melted away. Even Abby started to feel it, that rare sense of being included. Of being normal. Ashley kept the conversation light and easy, just funny enough to make them feel included but not so personal that it raised alarms. They started talking about home life, who had strict parents, who had chill ones, who was an only child. Kendra mentioned her 3 little brothers who drove her crazy. Layla talked about her stepdad trying way too hard to be cool. When it was Abby's turn, she hesitated. Ashley noticed immediately but didn't push. Just gave her that easy, inviting smile. Abby spoke carefully. "My parents are good. I'm adopted, actually." Ashley's eyebrows lifted slightly as if impressed. "That's cool. Must have been kinda wild growing up with that, huh?" Abby shrugged, trying to downplay it. "It's not a big deal. They love me." Ashley nodded like she understood completely. "Yeah. Sometimes real family isn't blood anyway." The way she said it was so smooth, so natural that even Kendra and Layla relaxed a little more. For the rest of lunch, they joked and laughed like everything was normal. Like Ashley wasn't a hurricane waiting to hit. After school, the 3 girls walked together across the parking lot, their backpacks slung low, the sun dipping behind the trees. At first they were quiet. Then Layla blurted out, "I still don't trust her." Kendra nodded quickly. "She's too cool. Too nice. It's fake." "I know it is." Abby bit her lip, glancing back toward the school doors where Ashley and her friends were laughing about something. "I don't know," Abby said quietly. "She seems okay." Layla shook her head. "I'm telling you, Abby. Be careful. She's not what she looks like." Kendra added, "We're not saying don't talk to her. Just don't tell her everything. Keep some stuff private." Abby smiled weakly and promised she would. But deep down, a small voice whispered something else. Something far more dangerous. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe Ashley really was different. Maybe she understood her in a way no one else did.
Chaos doesn't take a day off in this family, but then again, neither does love. Through every twist, every tear, and every betrayal, they've stood by each other's side. But what happens when fear tells you they might not? When you think the truth will only push them away? That's exactly where Abby finds herself, sweet, innocent, and now facing a kind of pressure no child should. What will she choose? And who will she trust? Meanwhile, Elisa finally opens up to her father about a past no daughter should ever have to share. A past filled with silence, shame, and suffering. But Ethan doesn't flinch. He listens. He embraces. He shows her the kind of love that doesn't break when the truth comes out, it deepens. And as for Patricia Lemon, she made a critical mistake going on national television to challenge the wrong woman. Elisa didn't just survive Patricia's lies, she destroyed them. Right there on the Dr. Andrew Show, she exposed the truth, humiliated a bully, and reminded the world that strength doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like poise, clarity, and the ability to walk off a stage with your head held high. But Ashley isn't out of the picture. Not yet. She's still fighting to pull Abby into her world of manipulation and control. The question now is, will Abby fall for it, or will she rise and follow the example of the one who changed her life, her dance teacher, her hero, her big sister?